at the top of the hour, so we will go ahead and get started as a few more people get logged in here. But I want to thank you for joining today. We know you are all very busy this time of year, and we appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day to join us. Today, we're going to talk about some of the basics to include when having a conversation about COBRA with employees. I am Katie Davis, the COBRA manager here at Omnify, and with me I have Hannah from our education team. If you do have questions throughout the webinar, feel free to utilize the Q&A feature. Hannah will help us monitor these questions and we will address them at the end of the presentation. With that, we will go ahead and jump in here. Before we get started, though, I do have to state that the material provided in this presentation is intended to provide general information only and is not intended to be exhaustive, nor does it constitute as tax or legal advice. Any opinions expressed in this presentation are those of me, the speaker, and should not be construed as tax or legal advice and should not be relied upon as such. Now that we have that out of the way, let's jump in. But before we get too far, I thought it would be a good idea to cover some basics about COBRA so we have a solid foundation as we progress through this presentation. Let's start with what benefit offerings qualify for COBRA. Most commonly, you're going to see medical, dental, and vision. Know that the contract with the EHA to have Omnify administer COBRA is only for medical and dental. However, it is important to know COBRA is more broad than just those two benefit plans. As you can see, there are several plans that do qualify for COBRA if there is a triggering event, also known as a COBRA qualifying event. If you are questioning if any of your other benefits need to have COBRA offered with them, it's best to seek legal advice to determine if that benefit that you offer is eligible for COBRA. Once you have that determination with your legal team, if you need Omnify to help administer any additional COBRA plans, let us know, and that is certainly something that we can help you out with. It is important to know that only certain events trigger COBRA. Most commonly, you're going to see voluntary or involuntary termination and reduction in hours. However, as you can see here, there are more events than just those I mentioned, Medicare being one of them. Know that Medicare can be a little tricky because rarely will Medicare be a trigger because insurance plans are not able to end someone's coverage due to them being enrolled in Medicare. With it being open enrollment time, also know that when someone drops coverage during open enrollment, this is not a triggering event for COBRA. So if you were thinking you were going to have to monitor who enrolled last year versus this year and who dropped and get those COBRA notices out, you are not going to need to do that as far as a COBRA triggering event. However, if you do have somebody that is new and newly enrolled in your benefits, you're going to want to make sure we get them an initial notice, which we'll talk about here on this next slide. So when we think about the COBRA notices, the two main notices that require action from you at the schools in order to trigger these will be the initial general notice and the qualifying event and election notice. When you're thinking about the initial general notice, this will go to anyone that is newly enrolled in your benefits. It's not something that you have to send every year, but you do have to send it within 90 days of someone enrolling in a COBRA eligible benefit. Best practice is to send the initial notice after someone has enrolled in benefits and after their benefits are effective. And this is because if you send someone the initial notice and they don't enroll in benefits and they leave your company, you've now extended COBRA rights to them that they were not eligible for because they didn't either enroll in benefits or were not eligible in benefits. And I will tell you that there have been several court cases throughout the years where this has come into play. The employer sent an initial notice out to everyone, and then as folks terminated, they were expecting COBRA and they were told they weren't offered because they were not enrolled. Well, they were sent the initial notice, and several employers over the years have been on the losing end of this decision because they sent that initial notice to all of their employees. When you think about the qualifying event and election notice, this is going to be the notice that must be sent when someone has a COBRA triggering event. This is the notice that lets them know they've had an event and what they need to do to elect and enroll in COBRA. To trigger these notices, you're going to log into the Omnify COBRA portal. For the initial notice, you'll select Add a New Hire. And for the qualifying event notice, you'll select Add COBRA Event. Now, if someone has had a COBRA triggering event, also know that COBRA coverage must be the same as when that person was an active employee. An employer is not able to make COBRA coverage different just because it's COBRA coverage. You might be thinking, well, what about direct bill? Isn't that COBRA? And while direct bill is very similar to COBRA, it does not have to follow the same regulations that COBRA does. Therefore, direct bill plans can be different than what an active employee had access to, but COBRA cannot. Interestingly enough, a lot of people don't realize that even if the coverage is no longer of value, COBRA must be offered. So this is when there is most likely no value to the former employee to enroll in COBRA coverage. So for example, if someone is moving out of the country, they're probably not going to extend their insurance coverage. However, COBRA regulations state that the offer of COBRA still must be extended to that former employee. Or perhaps your school offers what is considered a narrow network. And this is coverage that's specific to your region or even your town or local hospital. And even if they're moving across the state or out of state, it would not make sense for them to continue that coverage. Yet again, regulations say it doesn't matter. You still have to offer COBRA. We've had the question come up a few times over the last couple months of, hey, I know they have coverage at their new school. They're leaving my school and going to a new school. I know they are enrolling in coverage because they told me. Do I still have to offer them COBRA? The answer is yes. Even if you know they already have coverage elsewhere, you still have to offer them COBRA coverage because that is how it is written in the regulation. And as you all know, open enrollment season is upon us. And if you offer open enrollment for active employees, you do have to offer it for your COBRA participants as well. I'm sure you've seen the emails over the past few weeks asking you to approve your school's new plans and rates for the 2023-2024 school year. If you have not seen that email, make sure you check your junk mail or reach out to us at Omnify. You can also verify if you've approved your rates for the 2023 or 2024 school year by logging into your portal and selecting benefits. If your approvals tab has an exclamation point with a red circle around it, you have action to take. If you're not seeing that exclamation point with the red circle, that means you or someone at your school with access has already taken care of that approval process. As far as open enrollment goes for those active COBRA participants, we've already got that set up with Blue Cross Blue Shield. They've already been mailed their notices and they know exactly what they need to do. So there's nothing that you as a school needs to do to help them through this open enrollment this year. Of course, unless they have questions for you that are plan specific. One final note here. Make sure that the employee is covered by the group health plan on the day before the qualifying event. For example, if an employee is hired and their effective date of coverage is September 1st and they terminate on August 29th, that person did not make their effective date and they are not eligible for COBRA coverage. Now, you may have heard me throughout the implementation state that best practice is not to send the initial notice until after an employee's coverage is effective. And as I stated previously, that is because you can get into some legal trouble if you extend benefits when they're not technically eligible and then don't send them a COBRA notice. So even though it seems self-explanatory, make sure you are not sending the initial general notices to everyone that you hire because not everyone that you hire is eligible for COBRA. All right, let's talk about the COBRA timeframes. It's important to know that COBRA isn't forever. How long someone can be enrolled in COBRA is determined by the type of qualifying or triggering event that they've had. Most often, employees will fall into the 18-month category. They've either had a voluntary or involuntary termination, or they've reduced their hours. Or perhaps they haven't returned back from an FMLA leave. That is also considered a reduction in hours. If an employee, however, is considered disabled in their first 60 days while they're enrolled in COBRA, they can have COBRA coverage for up to 29 months. Now, this is a Social Security determination, and there are several steps that must be completed before this determination is finalized. So if someone falls into this category, they will work directly with the Social Security Administration on applying for this. And if that's the case, OmniFi's probably working very closely with them to get this extension set up as well. There are a handful of events that do trigger a 36-month COBRA maximum time frame. If an employee passes away, if there's a divorce or loss of dependent child status. So think of that loss of dependent child status being those kiddos that turn age 26. These dependents can carry COBRA for up to 36 months. You'll also see that some of these events affect the employee and their entire family, while others only affect dependents that had coverage. If you ever have any questions about what qualifying event to choose or how long COBRA coverage could last, please reach out and we are more than happy to have that conversation. Now that we have the basics, let's get into information that you should be sharing about COBRA when you have to have that hard conversation. And I will tell you from close to 10 years in benefits administration, the number one question that comes up when someone's asking about COBRA is, how much will this cost? Something I did when I was working in benefits administration was to have COBRA rates easily available and printed out so I could hand it to them. This way, while we were talking about the process of COBRA, getting enrolled, the participant could be processing the rates and they can begin to start formulating a plan for their future coverage. Be sure to let them know that COBRA coverage is the same coverage as when they were an active employee. Often, a question comes up of, can I use my same doctors? And you being able to let them know, yes, it is the same coverage, is reassuring to them as they're going through this, rather stressful time, and is very helpful during this time of transition for them. So what you see here, I'll zoom in a little bit, is a rate sheet that I just created in Excel and lists out not only the COBRA eligible plans, but lists out some other plans as well. But this here is just the COBRA plans. You can see here, I've got 2 medical plan options. What is the employee amount per month? What is the pay period deduction? How much is the employer contributing? And the total cost. And then over here, we have our COBRA cost with the addition of 2%. Now, I am well aware that 2 plus 2 is not equaling 4 here. You would expect to see this number in the COBRA column a little bit higher. With this particular employer, there was some reduction in COBRA costs coming in the back, which is why this COBRA amount is actually less than the total cost. But ordinarily, this total cost and your COBRA amount would just be 2% more. But this is something that I was able to give to new hires and prospective new hires as well, because it shows them exactly how much they're going to pay, how much the employer is paying on their behalf. And then when or should they leave, how much their COBRA is going to cost them. This again is from my benefits administration days. And here it's just a simple letter that lets them know, who and where to contact if they have questions. So while we're talking just COBRA benefits today, this does list out contact information for all carriers and benefit partners. Again, this is something that each employee would get before they left, or mailed out to them if they had left before we were able to talk. But I found it very helpful because they might not be thinking about their HSA or FSA when they are arranging to leave. And I found that something like this was also helpful in answering a lot of their questions, and it empowered them to reach out to the carrier if they had any lingering questions, thus allowing me to stay focused on my active employee population. This gives them an idea of what to expect and who to expect to receive notices from, and what their next steps are. Now, if you have retirees that approach you, you can direct them to the EHA website. There's a video that the EHA has put together to help guide your retirees through the COBRA and/or direct bill process. Omnify does not have information on the direct bill option for the early retirees. Therefore, they'll need to either wait for their retiree packet to come from Blue Cross Blue Shield, or they will need to reach out to someone at the EHA to get more information. So what does the enrollment process look like? I believe it's helpful to give basic information on the process, so when participants have questions, you as their trusted resource, you can help guide them. So after you make the entry into our portal, the participant will be sent a qualifying events letter. After reviewing the qualifying events letter, they can either mail in the election form that's included, or they can elect online using the web address that is in the letter. Personally, I would encourage participants to connect to their online self-service portal. This way they can streamline their COBRA enrollment, they can view COBRA rates, and they can set up free reoccurring payments. So no more mailing an election form off, waiting for the mail, now I mail my payment, now I wait for the mail. They can do it all online, and it's really streamlined for them. Also, let them know about the COBRA timelines that they'll need to keep in mind as they make their decision on whether or not to enroll in COBRA. A participant will have 60 days to elect COBRA, and after they elect COBRA, they have 45 days to make a payment. So you can see how someone could potentially stretch their COBRA election and payment out to about 105 days. This would allow the participant to be able to enroll in coverage that'll backdate to their first day without coverage. However, this also means that in order to keep coverage active, they're going to have to pay all months for premiums that have been missed. So if they stretch that out, maybe close to that 105 days, they're going to have to pay close to 3 months of premiums that were missed in order to reinstate. So COBRA coverage doesn't get to wait, and just turn it on, say 3 months later. It backdates to their first day without coverage. But this also keeps them from having a lapse in coverage should they need to seek care. Also keep in mind that just because the whole family was covered by your health plan when they were an active employee, that does not mean that the whole family has to elect COBRA coverage. Coverage can be for all or one of the family unit. When we're talking about COBRA enrollment, there are 2 steps that former employees must complete to be enrolled. Number 1, they must make their election. And number 2, they must make their payment before their COBRA is turned on and the carrier has their enrollment reflected. So sometimes we have people call in that says, I made my enrollment election and I'm at the pharmacy and they say I don't have coverage. Can you tell me what's going on? And we can look into that. And if we don't see that there's a payment been made, then we're explaining to them, well, you made your election, but you didn't make a payment. So technically you're not enrolled yet. So as you have this conversation, make sure you stress that they will have to make an election, make a payment, then they are considered enrolled. Speaking of payments, let's talk about the payment process. So participants are going to make their COBRA payments to Omnify. As I said before, this can either be done online or through the mail. If participants choose to pay online, they can make a one-time payment that has a $25 fee, or they can set up free recurring payments. Once Omnify receives the payment, we will update their record And at the end of that business day, we will send enrollment and or payment information notification to the insurance carrier to let them know to continue coverage for that participant. Another thing to think about when you're having that conversation about COBRA and payments is to let them know that while COBRA is technically month-to-month insurance, if your payment is not there before the first of the month, the insurance carrier is likely going to shut your coverage off until they receive that payment notification from Omnify. So if, for example, somebody has paid August's insurance, but they haven't paid September, come September 1st, most carriers are going to shut off their enrollment until a payment's received. So if they have any prescriptions or anything like that to fill, they're going to want to make sure they get their payment in. What I do recommend to a lot of COBRA folks, if their budget allows, for them to pay before the first of the month. That way they don't see that on-off cycle of COBRA and with their carrier coming on and off. So a couple different ways to do it. If you have a participant that has a lot of questions on how to make their payment, where to make their payment, have them give us a call. We are here for that, and our team's happy to help them. All right, we want you to know that we are here for you and your participants. So if you have questions, feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email. You can reach the COBRA team at cobra@omnifybenefits.com. Keep in mind that while we are in Lincoln, mailed COBRA payments are processed in our lockbox that's in Boston, Massachusetts. And if you have any questions about other services that Omnify offers or expanded COBRA administration, you can also email that cobra@omnifybenefits.com and we can get you that additional information out. Now that we are to the end, though, it does look like there are some questions that have come in. Hannah, are there some questions that we have out there?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Yep. Looks like we got a couple here. Okay. First one, what if an employee took only dental last year, but this year signed up for medical also? Is that a qualifying event?
If they did it through their open enrollment, then it's just going to work just like open enrollment. If they signed up for dental last year, we are under the impression that anybody that needed a initial notice from PayFlex would have gotten one. So they're not going to need to get another initial notice just because they've added another COBRA eligible benefit. If I did not answer your question, feel free to email that cobra@omnifybenefits.com, or you can certainly send another question with a little bit more explanation if you want to.
Perfect. And then it looks like we got another one here. We have a husband and wife that are employed. The wife was newly hired here. The husband has worked here for years and he carries the insurance for the family. Do I need to send the wife an initial notice even though she didn't take the insurance?
Nope. If she did not make her own election in a COBRA eligible benefit and kind of change his enrollment from maybe family coverage to employee child, and she took employee only, nope, you would not have to send her anything. Again, we're under the assumption that all eligible enrollees were sent their initial notice under the former administrator's system. And so, no, you would not need to send her an initial notice because she did not take the insurance, even though she's already covered by it. Also, I'll add a quick note with our Omnify initial notices. Those are addressed to the employee and eligible dependents. So there is part of the regulation that does say that you do have to make sure that you send an initial notice when a new spouse is added. So if you have somebody that gets married, you're going to want to make sure you trigger that initial notice again, even if you've already triggered it for that employee in the past, for their newly added spouse. You don't have to trigger that for any newly added children, but if there's a newly added spouse, you do have to trigger that notice.
Awesome. Okay. Two more here, it looks like, and they are both about the same thing. Wondering if the slides are going to be available after the presentation is over to either print or just get an email of.
Yeah, perfect question. I don't want to bog down anybody's inbox if they don't want the slides. So if you would like a copy of the slides, go ahead and email cobra@omnifybenefits.com, and I will be sure to get you a copy of the slide deck. Likewise, if you want to, edit that rate sheet that I had already created or edit that what happens to my benefits, if you shoot me an email, I will certainly get you the Word docs for those, so you can make those yours, and there's no sense in recreating the wheel, right?
Awesome. All right. It looks like that's all we have so far. I don't know if any more are going to come in, but that is it as of right now.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you, Hannah.
Mhm.
All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions coming in, I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And again, if you have anything, email us cobra@omnifybenefits.com. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day. Thank you.